Hey guys, it's Standing for Truth coming to you live tonight. I've got some friends here. We're gonna have some fun, talk creation, talk evolution. We're gonna review a little bit of the Jackson Wheat versus myself debate. We're gonna have some fun, talk creation from the other night. Go over a few points. I've got Neff here. I've got Jeremy, Landon, and Raw Matt. You know what? Raw Matt, if you wanted to say a few things and introduce yourself, we'll go to Landon and then Superbad and Film Free. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? I joined Standing for Truth on the last time. I really didn't say much about myself because I find it kind of irrelevant. I'm just here to help and debate and bring up topics. But since people want to bring up credibility all the time, I don't even know where to start. I guess when questions come in about me, I'll answer them then. Until then, I'm just raw Matt, and I love biology, and I've studied nutrition, and I love anti-aging. So that's usually my specialty is genetics, epigenetics, and how we can benefit from that field into looking at natural medicines and helping people that way.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Landon, this is going to be his first time appearing on the channel. Landon, if you wanted to say a few things, introduce yourself, give everybody maybe a little rundown of where you're coming from and what you believe.
Yeah. Hey guys, this is my first time on here. I've been involved in the creation and evolution debate for about 5 years now with my Facebook group. I'm particularly interested in biology and psychology. I recently got a Bachelor of Science in psychology, and I've written about creationism and evidence for creation before, and I have studied it pretty in depth. But this is the first. Almost all of my discussions have been written, so this is the first time that I'm really having a vocal discussion about it. But yeah, that's just a quick summary.
Welcome.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you on there, Landon. I think next is Jeremy or Superbad or whatever you're going by these days. Go ahead, brother.
My name is Jeremy. I live in the Philippines, Southeast Asia. I've been studying the origins debate for 15 years, creation evolution debate for 15 years. I'm a former atheist evolutionist. I'm also a former old earth creationist and theistic evolutionist. I respect old earth creationists and theistic evolutionists, but I have no respect for atheist evolutionists at all. I also got a 2-year vocational course on genetics, biology, and astronomy, and I got certificates too. So that would be it. Thank you.
Well, I like your just one quick thing to add to that. I like your style, the fact that you're, very well informed on evolutionary theory. You're a formal atheistic evolutionist. As a matter of fact, you're a lot more informed than a lot of the evolutionists that I've even talked to. So I like the way that you represent them, I guess, in an unbiased position, because it seems to trigger them even more. For example, I would recommend anybody go watch the discussion we all had where you went into great detail on the mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, because at the end of the day you presented it in a way, Jeremy, where you were unbiased, and the evolutionist can't accuse you of leaving out data. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one more thing, bear with me. I'm not very good in speaking in English, so that's all.
No problem. And Neff, on to you, brother.
Hey, I go by, my name is Evan. I go by Nephilim Free. Been doing Christian apologetics and for about 11 years on YouTube and elsewhere on the net. I'm a young Earth creationist and non-denominational Christian. And I've been going after the controversy over evolution and creation since I started doing apologetics. I find it to be something that's extremely important because it affects everything about our worldviews, and so that's my forte. It's the thing that I love talking about most. but I also love talking about the Bible and the history of Christianity and the validity of it. So that's pretty much me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Neff. I kind of wanted to get right into just a little discussion, a little review of a few of the points Jackson Wheat was bringing up in the debate the other day. I enjoyed it. I think it was fun. I'd like to do it again. Actually, Neff, I think it would be fun for you to maybe set up a debate on the creation evolution topic on Modern Day Debates, a channel. I think his channel is pretty, it's growing. It's awesome. I have a lot of respect for him. But I noticed and actually I think Jeremy will have something to say to this too, with the rarity of beneficial mutations, or with the rarity of duplications. But he brought up a couple examples of duplicated genes leading to a beneficial mutation in direct response to me asking for an example of new novel information being added to the genome, as well as a way to counterbalance the accumulating damage of deleterious mutations. But even if I gave him, or even if we gave him those few examples, the majority proves the rule, and a few rare beneficial duplications, I think it's pretty obvious. Actually, I think me and Matt touched on this in the Paleogenomics Destroyed video. They're not going to offset the many accumulating deleterious duplications, right? Let alone the other accumulating mutations. But the one that he talked about was the antifreeze proteins that are said to have evolved independently in Arctic and Antarctic fish. But at the end of the day, according to our model, organism adaptation, obviously through design in these types of environmental conditions, can lead to non-random changes, whether it be epigenetic or so. Because it's a hypothetical scenario on how these proteins were actually evolved in the first place, it's safe to say that it's not new novel information. And even if we gave it to them, it's not going to counterbalance the influx of deleterious mutations. How do you feel about that, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree. They're kind of reaching. We know that the junk DNA is pretty prevalent inside the body, and they still don't know what everything does. I mean, what if one of these a sleep form of junk DNA is actually switches on from epigenetics, just like anything else would be? We know that when we take a person that's been living in the Nordic countries and they move down to the equator, they're going to tan, and that's epigenetic regulation and melanin based in the skin. And what would allow that to happen if they've never been in that environment before? We know that they're not evolving, so it's just the exact same criteria.
And he used an example, I think it was Arctic cod, and I noticed you had some good information on, I mean, like we said, even if we just gave it to them, because at the end of the day, 99% of examples that are presented are examples of reductive evolution. And I noticed there was, little to no rebuttal on Lenski's experiment, who has demonstrated reductive evolution consistent with genome-wide degradation. But in regards to the Arctic fish example, how would you respond to that as, say, a information adding beneficial mutation, Matt?
Well, I would say it in a couple of different ways. I would say, one, the nucleotide region of the genes that are present in the Arctic cod, they say wasn't present before that. So it's a new function. I don't know how long they've been testing the Arctic cod to actually see if that's true or not, but we know that in different regions of the world, different fish make different antifreeze capabilities. So because there's different antifreeze abilities of different fish, they believe that all these different fish are evolving. And the Arctic cod one is their best example because of that nucleotide region of genes having no function prior to that. They like this one a lot. Although this is could be easily explained by either junk DNA, heterozygosity, as you like to use, but none of the glycoproteins are something that arose recently. They've been inside the body the entire time. I would have to say that if God made us like robots, it would have been ridiculous, and we'd all be dead from non-adaptation in the first place.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense for God to create us with that I mean, heterozygosity is just a fancy way of saying that he created us with, genetic diversity. But whether it's an epigenetic change through organismal adaptation, the majority proves the rule. And I mean, at the end of the day, we can talk about these few examples endlessly, but it's still not going to counterbalance the influx of deleterious mutations. Another one as well, and we know the melanoprotein, you're pretty knowledgeable on this as well. We touched it in great detail on the Paleogeia Destroyed video. It is a net loss of specificity, but if you remember in the debate with Jackson Wheat, he contested that. He denied the fact that it's a net loss of specificity, which means it's a net loss of information. How do you feel about the melanoprotein example being used as an example of novel information?
I think it's a horrible example because it did 4 functions before and now it does one that it had already done. It had done it to a really poor extent. And now it does it to a better extent. And it dropped the other 3 beneficial factors that it did. That would have never happened if these people weren't sick. And if the people are healthy, then it would have never happened in the first place. So I think it's a ridiculous example. They just don't know enough about it.
And if these beneficial mutations that, because Jackson in his, actually it was funny because the atheists in the chat were, one guy, I think his name was Ocean Razor or something. He was like, this is embarrassing. This is your last time, Jackson, because he wasn't really addressing a lot of my directly a lot of my points, a lot of my examples.
He had a pre-written statement.
Yeah, did you see that, Landon? You were in the chat, eh?
Yeah, he had a pre-written statement he was reading off of, I think. So
yeah, and he used, of course, Tony Reed, Paleogeia. They say that Dr. Sanford misrepresented, Kimura, Lynch, but all it really is a rabbit trail, because the crucial issue about it all is defining the correct distribution of mutational effects, right? So obviously all these deleterious mutations are unselectable. The question is, can beneficial mutations counterbalance the problem? So he spent a lot of time just kind of accusing Dr. Sanford of misrepresenting, but I think it's just him misunderstanding the model at hand. But if he thinks beneficial mutations can solve the problem of genome degradation, and there are so many beneficial mutations happening in the human population, selections should, effectively amplify them, and they should be popping up everywhere. But how come they struggle so much? Like, for example, his one example in a human population was the melanoprotein, which clearly is ineffective and insufficient. So it's just clear denial of the evidence, right, Matt?
I would completely agree. I mean, if that were the fact, we wouldn't have a disease increase going up so exponentially. They always say, well, we get more diseases because there's people are living longer. Well, okay, but that doesn't account for the fact that human population levels have pretty much been really constantly stable in the last few decades. As a matter of fact, they've been going down a couple years. So very negligible, of course, over the last decade. And what do we see? Matter of fact, the Cancer Institute has said that in the next decade, the cancers are going to rise 50%. That's incredible with life expectancy being the same. We know that 47% of all cancers occur in people under the age of 64. Inherited diseases and cancers through deleterious mutations are an observational fact. It's not like some type of mystery. If he's saying that's not the case, then great. He just cured multiple diseases. Then that's awesome. By just invoking that's not real, he's ignoring the evidence that all diseases aren't exponentially growing when we know that they are.
Well, evolutionists can't stand the idea that mutations actually cause disease. That just irks them to death. They just hate that science fact. It just kills them to no end. And they'll point out that whenever you quote a creationist scientist who quotes or cites an evolutionist scientist, you're obviously misrepresenting what they said.
Oh yeah,
because the evidence that they can't stand the information that even an evolutionist scientist would produce data that creates a problem for evolution, though he's not trying to do that. They can't stand that idea. So if a creationist cites it, oh no, it's not that the data argues against evolution or makes a problem for evolution. evolution, you've misrepresented it. This is a common theme, a tactic of evolutionists, and it's a really lame thing to do.
Well,
May
they
I
hate
say
the
something?
fact- Yeah, of course. Go ahead there, Jeremy.
Just quick. Tell them to do the numbers, predictions on, for example, beneficial mutations per year. How many do we need in evolutionary history? Per lineages, everything. Put it on paper. If they cannot produce those numbers, and I have not found any single papers, because evolutionists do not do the math in most cases. They accuse creationists of not making testable predictions and falsifiable predictions. They themselves are guilty of their own accusations against young Earth creationists. Get real. Thank you.
Well, they don't even meet their own standard, Jeremy. You're absolutely right. And actually, you had a few good points on duplications as well. Like if someone were to, bring up gene duplications, we know they're rare, right, Jeremy? What would your rebuttal, or what is your response to an evolutionist who, resorts to that of, say, gene duplications as their rescue device to solve all the problems?
Okay, gene duplications, not related to the entropy thing, just a
Yeah,
general.
just in general.
Actually, gene duplication is not a common event.
Yeah,
Meaning only 0.01 duplications per gene per million years. Macroevolution needs a lot more than 0.01 because of the massive amounts of living things we see today. Tell them to do the numbers. My goodness.
it all comes down to
The
them.
number. Sorry.
No,
The numbers just don't add up. Okay. With
it comes down to
0.01 duplications per gene per million years, their numbers just don't add up. Even if we give them millions to billions of years.
Yeah, there's just not enough time.
That is why Dr. Hugh Ross, who's an old Earth creationist, said macroevolution cannot make it in just millions or billions of years. Macroevolution needs trillions of years. And I agree with him. And even if I agree with him,
it would.
Well, that's why even people like Dr. Michael Behe, who accept universal common ancestry, but they deny the fact that an undirected, unguided process of, natural selection acting upon random variation, random mutation can lead to true novelties,
and I think,
whether it's
standing for truth. I think there's something that suddenly came into my mind that is related to your genetic entropy on the gene duplication thing, because as we know, by the way, did I interrupt you? Sorry.
No. Actually, that's okay, brother. Keep going.
Because I said I keep on forgetting things, but when I remember, I want to say it immediately. So sorry. Because as we know that this is the study. Duplicated genes are often silenced, correct? Meaning they become junk, so they're defective. So how can natural selection? So in cases, natural selection cannot act upon certain dead genes, correct?
That's a
And
good point. Yeah.
there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways actually to silence these duplicated genes. And so I'm gonna add more.
Yeah, keep going. Take your time.
And we know, I don't know if evolutionists know, they should, that some genes are needed in multiple copies. Okay? And when you look at it, it looks designed, not evolved. Okay? And may I add some Haldane's dilemma here? Just a short point. And then this should be a question to evolutionists, especially atheist evolutionists, because I don't like them. How could the organism survive well enough while waiting for those gene duplications to perfect themselves? There is some form of irreducible complexity involved here. How can a gene that is incomplete an incompleted gene duplication survive? Correct? Do you guys have any objections to this?
No,
was
in
a good
fact,
question.
even since evolutionists claim the majority of DNA is junk because it doesn't code for proteins, obviously natural selection isn't working too well for removing the junk from DNA. I
And
mean,
yeah,
you know.
and one more thing, evolutionists. Okay, since I said those about gene duplication, I think evolutionists will respond, oh, we abandoned the old gene duplication concept. We are now the more evolved gene duplication evolutionists. We now invoke whole genome, was it genome wide, or the original was small specific small sequences of duplicated genes only, but they now invoke much larger whole genome. I'm not sure if it's whole genome wide duplication. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's their gene duplication is no longer isolated. I mean, it is a lot more all at once, much larger chunk of DNA, and they even showed us examples of that. I forgot the example, but they showed that. So my question is this: if you open that up, okay, your concept evolutionist, atheist evolutionist. So if you're a theistic evolutionist, I am not against you. I actually thank theistic evolutionists for converting me to theism a long time ago. So I owe my theism to them. So I have nothing against theistic evolutionists, only atheist evolutionists. So if you suggest the duplication, the whole genome wide, whatever duplication thing, okay, may I ask you this? You usually use similar genes with similar functions, correct? For this argument. Now, in order for your macroevolution to work, you need different genes with different functions, correct? Do you have that? Cherry pick data. Yes, you have, but do the numbers. It doesn't work. Please do the numbers. All right. So your prediction was similar genes with similar functions. But in order for your theory to work, you need different genes with different functions, and there is not enough time for that. Do the numbers. All right. Don't just guess. Thank you.
Very good. No, I totally agree. And another thing too, Matt, you may have noticed, but in the debate, I brought up a lot of real time examples, like you were talking about, mutation related diseases, right? Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, autoimmune cancers, immunological. Obviously, there's an obvious pandemic. And a lot of it is probably epigenetic mutation as well. But the whole point is there's entropic degeneration on all levels. And he just completely ignored it. He even tried to say that there's no paleogenomic reasons for believing in genetic entropy. But for one, I like what you said and how he brought up a bunch of examples of extinct species.
Yeah.
What's the irony in that?
Right. He said, well, we don't find genetic degeneration in saber-toothed tigers and some other things. I'm like, well, why would you? I mean, what do we have? Like 5 of them total? Yeah, no, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's like, okay, well, since we can name all these different genes that are associated with diseases, then please name to me a list of other mutations that have now benefited people, because we don't have anywhere near that number. And we know that these aren't just all epigenetic regulated, because we know that they're handed down. Take the BRCA gene for breast cancer, for example. I inherited that from my mother. It's a 50% chance that you inherit it. I mean, that's deleterious mutation. That's inherited, and you get it, and that gene is switched on, and you can't turn that sucker off.
Well, the bizarre thing is this myth the evolutionists have, despite nearly a century of investigation into what mutations do, is this myth that evolutionists have that random genetic mutations are the stuff of evolution, that they are the great designers, that's what designs the new information, that builds new structural designs in the body plans of living things, creates new features, it creates proteins, etc. Mutation is the grand designer. What the truth is, of course, 90 years of studying mutations, a million or more studies now, have shown that mutations do no such thing. They actually cause degeneration of living systems, and in a myriad of ways. It's this bizarre myth that evolutionists have. You see, it was an idea formed back in the day when scientists really knew very little about genetics and or anything. And so when they discovered what DNA was and realized, oh, it's a package of information that defines an organism's body plan and its biochemistry, this is the recipe for making an organism. It's a book of information that tells you how to make a squirrel or a spider or a rat. When they realized that, they came up with this idea immediately. Changes to that. Changes the creature into a new type of creature. That's how evolution proceeds. And so they latched onto that. And it's true that if evolution were true, that would have to be true, because you would have to continuously input new information that would do this very thing. But unfortunately for them, 90 years of studying mutations have demonstrated mutations do no such thing. They destroy living systems. And so evolutionists have this ridiculous myth, anti-scientific myth. It's completely contrary to science, that mutations are this grand designer when they're actually destroyers. And they won't let go of it, because they know if they let go of the idea that mutations do this marvelous thing, instead of create all the diseases that are known to man, then evolution can't be true, because there's no mechanism, none, for the creation of a land-dwelling creature from a fish. It can't happen unless DNA is responsible. Changing DNA is what makes it happen. So they have to hang on to this ridiculous anti-scientific myth, because they're required to keep the evolution theory alive.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, a lot of it, especially the way I like to start debates and discussions, is, hey, let's define our terms. What exactly do you mean by the word evolution? Because I'm sure we can all agree that in regards to biological evolution, it means a change in allele frequency and populations over generations. No one's disagreeing. No one's contesting to the fact that that's what biological evolution means. But change in allele frequency is all you want. That doesn't mean that, dogs and banana plants are related through common ancestry. And someone who's kind of funny to talk to, who's a little bit actually, I think, irritating to talk to, is Fiona Robertson. I think you've talked to her before, Neff. But I didn't even know it existed. But I guess Ken Hovind debated her for a couple hours. I just discovered it the other day. So I watched it. And for one, she's not very good at defending universal common ancestry, but she thinks that if you agree with the definition of evolution, a change in allele frequency and populations over time, she thinks she's won. Because she thinks that's all you have to do is agree with that definition, and suddenly whales and pine trees are related. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what she does. And I've debated with her in Hangouts a couple of times, and I posed her one question. She made this claim that, well, look, human beings can be born with an extra finger. Frogs can be born with extra heads. See, obviously duplication occurs, so this is how you get the new information. And I pointed out, well, okay, adding a finger to a human being's hand is a duplication of an existing feature, not a new one in the body plan. Isn't that right? I pressed her on that for an hour. She would not admit. For an hour. I tell you, for 1 hour, she would not admit that adding a finger, an existing feature to the body plan of an organism. Because I had told her, we don't see any evidence. There's no evidence that new features arise in the body plans of living things, which would have to be true if evolution were true. Two things would have to happen. You would have to have completely new features arise incrementally in a body plan somewhere that didn't exist in the creature's antecedents. Secondly, existing anatomical features, like in the idea of fish land-dwelling amphibian tetrapods, or in the stinger of certain creatures, you'd have to have new existing features to be transferred transformed by mutation into ones that had new biomechanical functions, such as the limbs, the fins of a lobe-finned fish being transformed into the legs with digits and wrist bones of a land-dwelling creature, right? Transformation. So two things would have to take place if evolution were true. Brand new anatomical features would have to rise in little increments in the body plan that never had, that were not related to any anatomical feature in any of its ancestors, and existing anatomical features would have to be transformed in such a way that they now are a new type of feature with new anatomical, new biomechanical functions. And she said, well, look, a human being can be born with 6 fingers. There you go. That's evidence that this actually happens. And I pressed her. I said, but wait, Fiona, can you not understand? That is a duplication of a fully existing feature. It's simply adding another one. That's not a new feature. It's the same thing they already got. They already got a finger. It's just another one added onto the hand. Can't you acknowledge that's not a new feature? She said, but it is new. And I said, wait, no, it's not new. It's a duplication of an existing one. It's not something different from a finger. It is a finger, 100% a finger. It's got a cuticle. It's got a nail. It's got the same bones, the same skin, the same tendons, the same muscles, everything. It's just a new, another one. She would not admit for an hour that it was not a new feature, but it was just a duplication of an existing one. I just found that so hard-headed. It was so frustrating. Oh.
Well, it reminded me a lot of, because I've seen that, and watching the Ken Hovind one too. It was the same thing. Like, they both agreed that evolution means change in allele frequency in populations over time, and Ken Hovind kept pressing her on, you know, are there limits? Is there a barrier? Can you demonstrate the fact that, you know, pine cones and whales are related through common ancestry? And she just kept saying, well, that's, you know, the best explanation given the evidence. And they just, it was that exact same thing for about an hour and a half. She just seemed to think that because we agree that that is what biological evolution means, well, that must mean universal common ancestry is true, because, well, we see change in allele frequencies in populations. So it's just going in a circle. But I found it kind of funny. Actually, what is Fiona? Is she an evolutionary biologist? I know she has a PhD, right?
She's a theistic evolutionist, isn't she?
I know she's a theistic, yeah. But I think she also has a PhD, doesn't she, Nev?
I've heard of her before. I think
She has a PhD in biology.
Yeah. Okay, that's
a theistic evolutionist. She's a Christian evolutionist.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Actually, to go back to the
but she only hangs out with evolutionists and atheists. She never.
Well, that's the thing. That's
she never hangs out with Christians or
no. I mean, she scoffs at Christians, but actually, Matt, I wanted to ask you, because I liked your information that you had, your citations, because Jackson Wheat was talking about like the saber-toothed tigers, a lot of the paleogenomics that apparently refute genetic entropy. But what you said about the extinction, you know, what's the irony in that? But at the same time, and I brought up in the discussion as well, that there's growing evidence that early human populations like Neanderthals, Naledi, the hobbits, right, Homo floresiensis, they actually demonstrated and suffered from reductive evolution. You know, the reduction in body size, for example, that you see in the hobbits. And the Neanderthals are 40% less fit than modern humans. So at the same time, paleogenomics does show genetic degeneration. But Matt, you had pictures of like animals from the fossil record versus now, and how there's a clear decay and degeneration from those early ancestors. Go ahead.
Yeah, everything being larger and better. If we want to go and we look at turtles, we can see the ancient turtles and we pin them next to the other ones. We can look at the old opossums and next to these ones, the old bears, and put them next to this one. And we have a lot of so I just saw a comment with my name. Anyway, yeah, we have these things, and we can compare the ancient ones to the new ones, and we do see degeneration. Of course, the atmosphere being different back then, we creationists obviously see the old atmosphere before the flood as, you know, twice the amount of pressure and oxygen, and would account for these things. And the evolutionists had these back in the Jurassic period. So we see the same aspects of these things. They just we have we have the same reasoning for, or different reasoning for the way that they got there. We have 16 Neanderthals, the mtDNA sequence from 15,000 modern humans in DNA, and we align them, and we found the NARS D-loop mutations between them and the total mutations between them. We found that the ancient Neanderthal had about 10 mutations, and the total humans today have about 210. So we know that it was much better for them than it is for us when it comes to mutational load. And then the D loop was found to be in Neanderthal about 5, and it's 25 for humans. So it's our predictions that have actually would show and account for why we see those numbers, not the other way around. So that's fascinating.
And also the examples that you had about like the chimpanzees, and really just endless examples of genomic degradation based on the accumulating damage. So I don't understand how he can come in his rebuttal and say, you know, there's no evidence. And I even spent a considerable amount of time demonstrating why Lenski himself demonstrated reductive evolution. So it just must be a willful denial. But I noticed these guys, like obviously, Matt, you're familiar with Tony Reed. You're familiar with Paleogenomics. We made a good video on him. These guys that make these videos, at the end of the day, that's all they do. Once you press them on, for example, Tony Reed and Paleogenomics, we press them on genetic entropy, but they won't discuss, they won't debate. What's your interpretation as to why that is, Matt?
I think that they have an audience that they have to give information to, and if it's countered and it's counterintuitive to what they're saying and they can't answer it, it's just making them look bad at that point. You got to remember, it's probably a business. I know for Aaron Raw, he's made it his entire life. The very second video he made probably 10 to 15 years ago, it was an anti-God video. So it's obvious that he just hates God and anything that has to do with it. And he knows that there's only one opposition to evolution, and that's creation. There is no other option out there. So if he can destroy that one aspect, he wins, and that's what his crowd wants to see. So that's why when I leave a comment, they're deleted, I'm blocked, as you've seen with Tony Reed and all of them.
Yes, I agree with Ron, Matt. Actually, evolutionists are really very biased, atheist evolutionists especially.
That's true.
I remember okay, sorry. I remember Dr. Andrew Snelling last year, or was it last year? He was planning to go to the Grand Canyon to collect rock samples in order to prove to prove something. I forgot what he's planning to prove. And a group of evolutionists tried to stop him, and it went to court. And in court, the issue was, is this some kind of a discrimination against an opposing view? And it was proven in court that yes, it was about discrimination against an opposing view. That's why they don't want Dr. Andrew Snelling of Answers in Genesis to go collect rock samples. Eventually, Answers in Genesis won because it was proved that it was a discrimination of an opposing view. Atheist evolutionists, okay, not theistic evolutionists, atheist evolutionists are afraid of opposing views. That's all.
No, I completely agree. Actually, one other thing too, because I think a big example of genetic entropy, really we don't even need it because all the examples we've spent an hour presenting them, but the H1N1 virus, you know, that went from a red hot pandemic to a whimper to an extinction event in only 90 years. You know, I use that example too, and all Jackson said in his rebuttal was, you know, Dr. Sanford misrepresented the data, the information, but gave no reason as to why H1N1 virus even went extinct in the first place. Just an ad hoc explanation. And I've asked RJ Downard as well, and I've asked a guy named Nestling, you know, okay, if Sanford misrepresented the data, explain to me why H1N1 virus went extinct in humans and it's the human version that went extinct. Sometimes they confuse it with the swine version. And there's semantic wordplay on fitness. All they're doing is moving the goalposts, because the fact is this H1N1 did go extinct. And there was decline. It wasn't adaptive evolution, because adaptive evolution doesn't lead to extinction. It was clearly reductive evolution, and they have no way out of it. And I have yet to receive an answer as to how it went extinct. But, oh, it wasn't genetic entropy. Of course not. It can't be.
Well, the fossil record testifies that everything's getting smaller, weaker, and dumber. Look, megafauna is a prominent feature of the fossil record. Plants and animals of enormous size. They just can't grow that big anymore. I believe that the difference is change to the Earth's environment caused by the Noahic flood and genetic decay, mostly change to the atmosphere. But if evolution were true, why is everything getting so small, weak, and stupid? Dragonflies with a 2-foot wingspan, sloths that weigh 2,500 pounds, bears as big as a pickup truck with a camper shell on top. The list are armadillos, the size of a tiny little 1950s Greek automobile or something. The list goes on and on and on. Elk, deer that were of tremendous size. I mean, you think an elk is big. The deer that lived in the past on this earth were monsters. Camels, twice the size of a modern camel. Everything's getting smaller, weaker, and dumber, including man. So, what is how is that evolution? Now, the fossil record just shows us this: things don't change, and there was a flood. That's it.
Well, and really, they're just science deniers, just like you said. CRISPR in the chat here, just like RJ Downer, just like Jackson Wheat, they just wave their hand. H1N1 didn't go extinct, and then they bring up the swine flu version. I mean, they're just so wrong about it. I'm on Google right here. In NIH, okay, so it's a secular page, www.ncbi. It says H1N1 has failed to cause any severe global pandemic, and the human version, like I said, H1N1 went extinct from 1957 to 1977. So it's a fact that it went from a red hot pandemic to a whimper to an extinction event in 90 years. Are you familiar with the H1N1 extinction, Matt?
No, not too much. I just first heard about it through you, so I researched it a little bit.
H1N1 is not the only example. There are others which went extinct, as we know.
Oh, exactly, and they just deny it. I mean, CRISPR in the chat there just completely denied it, and what they'll say is that the H1N1, it evolved exactly the way that they would expect, but they accuse us of leaving data out. They leave data out because the codon bias declined consistently over time, which is not actually consistent with adaptive evolution. And it's clearly shown that they got worse, not better, at interacting with human DNA, right? So that does correlate to slower replication, which means less lethal infections. And the viruses, it became less lethal because they got worse, not better, at doing their one and only job, which is replicating themselves. So it went extinct. They need to stop bringing up the swine flu version, because yes, that's going around. But another thing, Dr. Robert Carter, he's coming out with a rock solid paper to demonstrate it even more. But the science denial is flabbergasting on all levels.
Well, even you mentioned Aaron Raw. He is absolutely completely anti-theist. That's his big. He has two lines of argument. One, your Bible is stupid and you can't believe it, and the other is that evolution is true because of phylogeny. And if you deny that, then you're just an idiot. But he uses evolution to try to discredit creation, because he wants you to not believe in God, and it's just a diatribe for him. He makes so many errors when it comes to his thing about the Bible. I've made 4 videos and relatively recently about him, and almost everything he says about the Bible, it doesn't matter what it is wrong. Almost. How does somebody be wrong so consistently so much? Like say 10 things in a short period of time about the Bible. Well, the Bible teaches this and that and the other, and every one of them be wrong. How do you do that? How do you fail so successfully? It's unbelievable. But But that's what evolutionism is today. It's become, because of the hard argument that have been put forth against evolution and for creation, especially since the early 1980s, the evolutionist camp has become very anti-theist and very vigilant and they're ruthless. And the reason for that is because their worldview is challenged. You know, when you challenge evolution, you're challenging their worldview, and that's what they can't stand.
Well, that's exactly right, Neff. And you know what? Just the fact of, genome degradation, no real example of, an information adding mutation, the fact that we're going down, not up, when they do appeal to, say, the fossil record, cladistics, it's really just circular reasoning, because the first and primary assumption, like let's say if we're talking about phylogenetics, the first assumption of phylogenetic classification methodologies is that common ancestry is true. But if they don't have a mechanism, if it's clearly demonstrated that, natural selection acting upon random mutation variation will not build a genome, that means that primary assumption can't be true. So all that evidence from paleontology, all those, cladograms and phylogenetic systematics, I mean, they're just based on a false assumption, right?
Oh, it's assumptions of similarity, that a similarity is evidence of ancestry even between genus. And it's just it's one assumption after another. But when you compare, for example, here's an interesting thing that kind of kills the whole phylogenetics things. When you compare the proteins in one type of living thing or another, even creatures that are said to be related to each other in a relatively short evolutionary time span, such as an amphibian and a reptile, you'll find that thousands and thousands of proteins in their bodies are not the same. In human beings and chimpanzees, the difference is 80%. Now, if evolution were true and human beings were closely related to chimpanzees, the opposite of that should be true. 80% of our proteins should be the same, not different. And when it comes to a protein, a difference in a protein, even by a single amino acid, much less numerous amino acids, is a unsurmountable problem for evolution because of the specificity and complexity of proteins and how they're formed. So what you'll find is in all their phylogenetics, they tend to stay away from the certain facts that they don't want you to think about. And one of them they don't want you to think about is how different the whole body of proteins are between different types of creatures. See, what they'll find is, let's say that there's a protein in an organism that's comprised of 500 amino acids in a row. Now, let's say that only 2 of them are different between this one creature and another. Now, they'll say, look at the tremendous similarity. 99%, 99 point something percent of the amino acids in this organism's protein and this particular protein are the same as in that other species. You see, because they're related. But the problem with that is a difference of 2 amino acids is a difference that means one organism can't be related to the other, because evolution can't make proteins. Proteins cannot evolve by mutation. They cannot. They are too complex, too specific. Mutations do not design proteins. And if you change a protein code, you mutate a protein code and change even one amino acid in a protein that's 500 amino acids long, you're going to have one or 2 results. The protein is going to be less efficient, and that is very possibly going to cause a disease, or it's not going to function anymore at all. So that's how specific a protein is. So it's really bogus when they say, look at the tremendous similarity in the protein codes between this creature and that creature. That means nothing. That means nothing at all, because a difference of 1 or 2 amino acids in a 500 amino acid protein is all the world difference. It's a difference that if it's caused by mutation, the protein will either be less efficient and it causes a biological weakness, possibly a disease, or the protein doesn't function anymore at all. You can't tinker with proteins. They're too specific. So their argument that protein similarity, high similarity in the number of amino acids in one organism and another, is evidence of relatedness is no such thing. It's evidence of specificity that's by design. Very opposite of what they say.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. And if you look at homoplastic traits, the similar in function, but they have different underlying structures, and those can't be explained by universal common descent. There's so many inconsistencies with these trees that there's a lot of rescue devices invoked, right? Your convergent evolution. So these phylogenetic classification systems are not as nice and neat as they want you to believe. Because wouldn't you say, Neff, invoking convergent evolution is like an indirect admittance to an inconsistency in their nested hierarchy?
Well, it points out that they're willing to believe the most bizarre things. For example, wings evolved in insects, independently in birds, independently in bats, independently in pterosaurs. How many times do wings evolve? That's the magic of evolution. You know, that evolution is able to produce something as astonishing as a wing over and over and over again for different types of creatures, because that's how easy evolution is. It's just absurd. The idea that a wing, I mean, the complexity of a wing and how it functions in something as small as a bee or a wasp is truly, or a dragonfly, imagine that. It's truly an astonishing thing. And the way that this wings give the ability to control the animal's movement in space. To believe that that evolved is just ridiculous. Then to believe that evolution is going to redesign wings all over again for birds, and then it's going to do it for this kind of creature, and that kind of creature, and that kind of creature, and pterosaurs, and it over and over and over. Evolution is truly some magical stuff, I'm telling you. It's just absolutely genius that anything that's needed just happens to come into being. If it's needed, think about this. What would be the purpose in a bird evolving wings anyway? To go to the sky when the better food support source is on the ground. There's not even an environmental pressure to cause an organism to evolve wings to take to the skies. What benefit could there be for that? The best food supply is on the ground. So evolution is saying, well, so the organism can avoid predators. Really? So how come then dogs didn't get wings? How come, so many other creatures didn't get? Why didn't rats get wings? You know what I'm saying? It's just an ad hoc special pleading. You see how they just make it up. It's just a just so story. It's what they call just so stories. And that's what evolution is chock full of, is countless just so stories.
And
Well, that's how Darwin was.
And there's so many examples of convergent evolution too. Like, I mean, there's like one article I just looked at. It's talking about it's called prolonged milk provisioning in a jumping spider, where like a jumping spider has a type of milk that it gives its young, and I mean, it's just like it's very similar to like mammalian milk. That's just another example.
Well, exactly.
That's a good example. That's a good example.
Actually, what about Jeremy? What about the echolocation example with bats? And I know that's a example you like to bring up.
But the way I see it, we have to look deep into the genetics when we look into the. By the way, like before I say anything, evolutionists did not predict convergent, the idea of convergent evolution. Okay, why? Because, for example, in this specific tree here, let's say the whale lineage, you would expect similar genetic markers or SNPs, SNPs, within this line, only unique to this line, specific sequences. But the problem is, we also found those precise sequences, and I mean to the nucleotide level, to the most basic unit of DNA. We find those precise sequence on a species far from the whale lineage. So how did that happen? How did they evolve the precise sequence.
Well,
Unless aliens came and did it, or God did it. Oh, atheists won't accept that.
well, exactly like I explained to Jackson in the
How
debate.
did it?
Yeah,
It was
no,
never predicted. Never predicted. They only
so
came up with convergent evolution after it contradicted their theory.
exactly, yeah. Rescue device after rescue device.
And there's a lot more. A lot more. Don't worry. We won't say everything here. Don't worry.
I'd like to touch on that bat evolution thing. There's a new fossil been found of a bat, and they claim that it's evidence of evolution of bats because they say it had no echolocation because of the small size of its ear bones, the cochlea, implying that it didn't have the ability to echolocate, and if those features weren't present. The problem is, and it's because it had a relatively small head compared to some known species of bats, and it had 5 claws on its fingers, while modern bats have a claw on only 1 digit or 2 digits on each quote unquote hand. So there's two differences in this creature, and they say also, well, its limb proportions are different, longer hind legs. So it's a little different looking bat, but guess what? It's a bat. Okay, so the whole argument stems from basically that it has a smaller head than modern bats, had a little bit longer legs than modern bats, had 5 digits, finger bones protruding from its wings instead of 2 or 3, and then the claim that it didn't have echolocation because it had smaller inner ear, middle ear bones. Well, firstly, they don't know that it didn't have echolocation. Smaller doesn't mean it didn't have the feature. So this is an evidence of evolution. The biggest difference between it and modern bats is this digits thing. But that's not a problem, because look at the Caparu and Podcapiste Italian wall lizards. They changed the environment of the thing, and it stopped producing cecal valves, and then returned it to its natural environment and diet, and it started producing them again. So an organism can produce or lose an entire anatomical feature. It's a tiny little acid pump in the stomach, a very tiny little acid pump in the stomach wall, and if needed, by turning genes on or turning genes off. But all it indicates is it already had it. So the difference in finger bones doesn't show that it's evolving to become a bat. It just shows that there's variety in creatures, just like there is today. So there are horses, did you know, that have 2 toes, and some have 3 to this day, right now. Horses with 3 toes. So it doesn't blow my mind that we find a bat with 5 digits instead of 3 like today. So it's just a just so story. There is no fossil record that shows the evolution of bats. Whenever they find a bat in the fossil record, it's just a bat. It's completely a bat. It has bat features. There's nothing different. If evolution were true, there would be sequence after sequence after sequence of all types of living things in the fossil record that would show evolution. As Dwayne Gish, the famous creationist paleontologist, said, if evolution were true, there would be more transitional forms in the fossil record than fully formed ones. It's the opposite of what we see. The evidence is just not there. The evolutionists rely on empty assumptions, speculations, and wishful thinking, and just so stories instead of physical evidence.
Correct. That's right. When you line up a series of, let's say, dog skulls, okay? Let's say all the dogs today, all right? They're skulls, and then after 1,000 years or 2,000 years later, like that, new sets of what do you call scientists? New sets of scientists come and look at those bones. They will line them up like what evolutionists do today. They will conclude they look like transitional forms because they seem to get bigger and bigger and more complex. But they didn't know what we know today, that those dogs are not really evolved. They're just variety of dogs. So that's how easy. And by the way, there are a lot of scientific blunders only in the last 100 years, as we know. 100 years. A lot of scientific blunders.
Well,
If
and
you
the
are-
How
thing
about
is too.
how
Oh,
about
sorry.
if we are talking about billions of years,
Well, the thing is, the
right?
fossils too that we're talking about here, they're really just circumstantial evidence in need of a theory that can even account for how universal common descent could occur. So if that theory that they're putting forth can't even explain how the information in living organisms could have actually been built up, then at the end of the day, that circumstantial evidence is just, like I said before, based on a false assumption. And I know you were watching the debate super bad, and what you said there about the echolocation.
What you said, not what I said.
No. What you said here a little bit, like a couple minutes ago, how we were talking about the whale and the echo markers. If you were watching the debate, I use that as an example on one of his specific genetic markers. But the evolutionists have been confused about that. I should have thrown in the word junk in there possibly, but even after re-articulating the argument, they still don't understand. Do you think they just have a lack of understanding, or like, how do you explain it there, Superbad?
Actually, the guy, I forgot the name. Jackson Wheat.
Jackson Wheat.
He showed you 3 genetic markers, all from the whale, 3 or 2, if I'm not mistaken. All of those 3 I read from Dr. Dennis Venema's book. He is one of the top 20 evolutionists in the world, a Christian theistic evolutionist from Biologos. And he himself, I forgot, I don't want to be accused of quote mining here, but he himself expressed some doubts over his own whale genetic markers. Okay, I'm a little lost here. What was your question again? Sorry.
Well, because they weren't understanding what I meant by the inconsistencies in using that specific genetic marker, because I was saying that the echolocation genetic markers on the whale, like while evolving, they don't actually show echolocation markers evolving, but instead it's a completely non-evolving markers. They show up somewhere much further beyond the whale lineage with
Yes,
precise genetic sequences, right?
In bats, for example, and there are several more which have echolocation genetic markers which are not specific or not even close to the whale lineage. Okay, I forgot. It was a long time ago. I was still in school. There was a paper. Of course, evolution atheists can dispute this because I forgot about this. They actually, regarding the whale thing, they actually predicted that we should find, because we see echolocation markers on whales, correct? So they actually predicted we should find those same markers on the whale lineage from a 4-limbed animal today might contain it. They predicted that, actually. I forgot which paper, so those atheists can come after me on that. It's okay. But they predicted those should exist in land creatures today. Specific to the whale lineage, but we don't find them. We don't find them. This is a failed prediction. And if we do find them, they should be junk, correct? So if we find them, they should be junk. So that's another point. Did you guys understand that? Sorry, I don't know how to explain it very well in English.
You're doing fine.
Yeah.
They're not finding the genetic evidence they need. Are you guys familiar with the fraudulent fossil recreation made by Dr. Gingrich relating to whale evolution, a creature called Rhodocetus? Evolutionists were desperate.
Yes, correct.
Yes, yeah, he fashioned a model of Rhodocetus. They found only a partial fossil of the creature, and so he had his model constructors build a model of it. You know, that's what they always do, and they send them out to museums and natural history, and then they start showing them to kids in school to indoctrinate kids to believe evolution. And his model showed that Rhodocetus had a fluke tail like a whale, but smaller, and that it had a blowhole on top of its head. And however, this was completely wrong, because later finds of Rhodocetus, they found more complete fossils, including the whole head. And guess what? It had no fluke tail, neither did it have a blowhole on the top of its head, to show that it was evidence of evolution, transitional form to whales. And so when confronted with this evidence on film, in a film made by Dr. Carl Werner, a creationist, young earth creationist, he's a physician, an emergency room physician who's been involved in the controversy over evolution for a couple of decades now. He's made a marvelous film called Evolution, the Grand Experiment. And he interviewed Dr. Gingrich on film about this and said, but you're familiar, aren't you now, with the newer find of Rhodocetus, that it had no fluke tail and that it had no blowhole. And he made him admit on camera that his reconstruction was fraudulent. It's the most embarrassing moment for Dr. Gingrich. And this is the way evolutionists work. But let me point out this one thing about the whale evolution. Imagine two nostrils merging and transforming and migrating up the skull, right across the top of the head to behind the brain to create a blowhole. Do you see a problem with this? Nasal passages converging before they even get to the brain. Where does it go? Right through the brain? Did the brain split while this whole breathing hole was moving through the top of the head past the brain? Did it split into two and go around the brain? And then you have to imagine the most unfathomable just so story to believe whale evolution. It's insane. How does that work even? It's just nonsense.
I'm sorry, I have to clarify what I said a while ago. I think I missed something. The prediction, I still don't have the paper, by the way. The prediction was, of course, that we would find certain sequences connect around the vicinity of the echolocation genetic markers. Of course, because animals today, most land animals do not need echolocation, correct? So the prediction was we should find at least partial DNA sequences that would match from land animals, from the whale lineage, from the four-limbed creature. We should find at least a small sequence, but not echolocation sequence, okay? I don't want evolutionists to accuse me of, I don't know, what was their accusation against standing? I forgot. Just a small sequence which matches today's whale echolocation genetic sequence. So there should be a little match, little from the land, from the land base. From whale, this is whale, right? This is it evolved from this whale, and it evolved from this land animal. This animal should at least show a hint of an echolocation genetic marker about to evolve. Okay, not genetic marker yet, but at least it's at least what we see now in the echolocation genetic marker, something resembling it. Not precisely the marker, but even things around its regions, promoter regions, and so on. Its organizational pattern. At least a bit of it should be found, but we don't find it. That's it. I hope I hope everybody understands. Sorry for.
No, I'm glad that you kind of elaborate on that, because the evolutionists seemed a little bit baffled in the debate. But I've got a book here by Lee Spetner. It's really good. I'm just kind of delving into it right now. It's new. It's called The Evolution Revolution. But he touches on that with the echolocation systems. But I'm going to read directly from it because I find this interesting, because he says based on a molecular analysis of the protein Preston, puts whales and dolphins squarely with the bats. And Preston is a sound-sensitive protein that is essential for hearing in general. And in particular, it is a part of the hearing mechanism of the echolocation system. So he says the Preston molecules in whales and dolphins have 14 amino acids that are not in the Preston molecule of any other mammals except for the bats, whose Preston protein also has those same 14 amino acids. So he concludes that this is strong evidence that the phylogenetic tree does not actually represent objective reality, and should cast strong doubts over common descent. So, I mean, there's just, what's that?
Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
No,
I would
that's
like
okay.
to say something about a point Neff made a while ago. If you're done, when you're done.
No, I'm done. I just wanted to point out that
Yeah. Neff,
further inconsistency. Go ahead.
Neff, you were mentioning about the whale smelling gene or organ in which starts to form at the front of the face of at the front of the face first, correct?
Yes,
Then migrating to the top afterwards, correct?
yes, that's the idea of evolutionists, that the two nostrils merged into a blowhole and migrated
Yeah.
up the skull to behind the brain.
Yes, thank you. Of course, I am still fair towards evolutionists. And Neff, do you know they use that as evidence for evolution? Because today, in the embryo, when you look at embryonic development of humans or other animals, the nose is in front of the embryo already, correct? Right? So it's already in front.
Sorry, say again. Say again.
Which part?
That last thing about the embryo.
Human.
You say?
Yeah, when we look at the embryonic development of most land mammals today, or maybe all, I forgot the exact data. The nose is already in the front by default, correct?
Yes.
But the whale, it started in the front hoop, correct? In its embryonic development. Actually,
Yes, it's a different genetic pathway to develop nostrils than it is to develop a blowhole. That's correct.
this is how evolutionists cherry pick data. Because our embryonic development, land animals embryonic development of the nose starts in front, and whales, their embryonic development also starts in front of the face, just like mammals. They infer common ancestry immediately based on that.
It's not even the same genetic pathway.
Yes.
There are many examples of this.
That is how they cherry pick data. I read all the papers about that. Especially, and there's something a lot about that in Dr. Venom's book.
It gets even worse for evolutionists than that. For example, they'll say homologous structures, the comparative anatomy argument, that frogs have 4 limbs because fish had 4, lobe-finned fish had 4 main fins, and land-dwelling creatures had 4 limbs because, well, frogs have 4 limbs, and birds have 4 limbs because frogs had 4 limbs. This kind of, not that frogs are a direct ancestor of birds, you understand, but that's the claim. But the problem with that is, for example, the homeobox genes that develop the limbs in a frog are not the same genes not even in the same location on the DNA molecule as the genes that make the limbs for the bird. So if evolution didn't preserve it, how in the world did it develop it, the limbs into wings? You see what I mean? It's a different genetic pathway. The Hox genes are not the same genes, and not even in the same location. How could evolution do this without preserving, building upon what already existed? It had to have started from scratch. And evolutionists don't like talking about this, but because they're not the same genes in the same location for so many different kinds of creatures, like the legs for the limbs for a lizard, a gecko, for example, are not going to be the same homeobox genes and located in the same location as those in a chimpanzee. They're going to be completely different, or even a creature that evolutionists would believe is much closer to them, such as a lobe-finned fish. if evolution didn't build upon what already existed, it would have to start from scratch and build new homeobox genes in a different location to create the same feature. That doesn't fit the evolution narrative. That completely contradicts it. And also, then you've got this magical scenario of evolution where evolution is constantly, because of it's a different genetic pathway, you've got evolution is magically redesigning, designing astonishing complex features like limbs in this creature and limbs in that creature from scratch all over again, over and over and over and over and over again. That's a real great problem for evolutionists, so they don't like to talk about it to the public. They won't tell you that the homeobox genes that make the limbs for a frog are not the same genes that make the limbs for a Gila monster or a bird. But how could that not be so if evolution is true? This is a tremendously serious problem for evolution.
One more thing, since you did mention the Hox gene, Neff, do you know that evolutionists use the Hox gene as part of their overall SNPs on determining their common ancestry genetic markers argument?
Well, they'll use anything of similarity. If they find any slight similarity, it's because evolution is true. You know that.
No. The sequence itself of the Hox gene.
Mm-hmm.
There are sequences in the Hox genes too, correct?
Oh, there's going to be similarity in Hox gene found in a frog and in a bird. There's going to be base pairs in alignment that are the same. It's a given, you know.
I recall this common design information in the Hox gene was predicted by creationists, correct? Do you remember who predicted it? Which evolutionists, of course, ignored?
No, I don't recall.
Because I know this prediction was fulfilled. This is now what we observe today. I forgot. Hang on. I remember the evolutionary prediction on the Hox gene was these genes, through millions of years of evolution, should change or mutate. Correct. But this Hox gene actually surprisingly remained constant. It's just like this is found all over the place. Even the Y chromosome doesn't show evolution at all. Correct. So why then have these sequences remained unchanged for eons of time? That was their original prediction. I know they have a developed rescuing device for this, which I forgot. What?
They always have one.
Yeah, because but still they did not answer their own problem at the start, because given the rate of mutations and the time evolutionists think it evolved, sorry, I get lost when I speak in English. It simply doesn't make sense that the region would have diverged genetically in any organism if it weren't somehow essential, correct? My goodness, so many contradictions in their theory, so many failed predictions.
Endless
contradictions. And I was there when they predicted all of those. I was in school. Thank you, that's all. But you know what I mean, right, Neff?
Yeah, they've always got a rescuing device, always. They see everything that's similar, any similarity as evidence of relatedness, and they use endless, and they don't like to talk about the problems for evolution, like the non-preservation of the Hox genes that develop the limbs in a gecko and in a Gila monster or something else. They don't like to talk about the tremendous problems for evolution. And if the general public were to be made aware of these incredible holes in their theory, then the house of cards comes falling down. That's why they don't like talking about it.
You are exactly right, Neff. Every day when I wake up, I look at all science websites, and there doesn't come a day when I don't find an evolutionary article which says we assume, we think, maybe, so many magic words. Exactly the God did it phrase they accuse creationists of making. So many we assume, we think, maybe. God's right?
It's like so their version of the
no predictions, no testable predictions. Oh, by the way, to be fair to evolutionists, yes, you got testable predictions, mostly based on uniformitarianism assumptions. I'll give you that. But you have more failed predictions and more guesses in your literature than you are willing to admit. I've seen it. Don't play games with us.
Well, it's just like Jeremy with the mitochondrial DNA rates and testable predictions, right? You know, the evolution will say, well, natural selection did it. You know, it's like it's their god of the gap. They won't put it
one
on
more
paper.
thing. Yeah, standing for truth. One more thing. It again came to mind. Sorry for interrupting you. I'll let you finish.
No problem. No problem.
Since you talk about the mutation rate, there's also a bias here. I watched the Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, Dr. Dennis Venema debate, and Dr. Dennis Venema mentioned Dr. Jensen did not include substitution rates in his rates, and I would agree. Dr. Jensen did not seriously include the rates, but there's a reason why. Okay, because there are more rates consistent with previous measured rates. I don't know how to explain this very well in English, but there are consistent rates. Okay, I'll just use the word consistent rates because substitution rates give different rates. So consistent rates outnumber the rates suggested by substitution rates, and those same constant mutation rates. Where did Dr. Jensen get those? That's the question. They get those from evolutionary literature itself. It is based on uniformitarian standards. Evolutionists are not happy that Dr. Jensen is using their own weapon, their own uniformitarianism standards against them. So they invoke that Dr. Jensen did not include substitution rates. Okay? But here's the point. Dr. Jensen already made the prediction. Why not we just go see if it's true or not? So if it's true, then if those predictions are true based on those rates, then Dr. Jensen not using substitution rates would be justified, correct? Am I right? Why don't we just focus on the testable predictions? No. Evolutionists cannot do that because they accuse creationists of not being able to make testable predictions. But now they see testable prediction and they have to invent something else. They have to come up with something else. And by the way, one more thing. Those substitution rates, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, are already included not directly included, but they're already indirectly included in the uniformitarian consistent mutation rates that evolutionists are already established. And Dr. Jensen used those. So it's already there in a way, correct? Isn't it obvious?
Well, exactly right. And
I hope I make sense here because I struggle in English really.
No. You're doing just fine, actually. You make a lot more. I think you make a lot of sense. We can understand you perfectly. And in regards to Dr. Jensen too, because and I've used it a couple times. Actually, Neff and I talked to RJ Downard and Jackson Wheat about this, but the shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity that was seen in the finches leading to speciation quick. The evolutionists didn't deny it, but all Jackson Wheat said was provide the genetic evidence that indicates all terrestrial organisms are displaying the same trend towards homozygosity. So he just brushes it off, and through talking with Dr. Jensen said, that's exactly the point. No evolutionist or creationist has this data. No other example of speciation in real time has been documented. That's why the data from Darwin's finches are so wild. It's exhibit A for evolution and the first example of attempting to measure speciation in real time. And what's amazing is it fits exactly what replacing Darwin predicted. But it just goes to show how biased the evolutionist is. The testable predictions are being made, and all they can do is scoff. But where's their testable predictions?
Yes, the point is the numbers are already there. We can go test them. Dr. Jensen even asked Dr. Dennis Venema of Biologos, let's go test them.
Yeah, and he was scared. Right. Remember, he was scared. What did Dr. Venema say? He said, well, I just don't think we have enough information yet. And he actually applauded Dr. Jensen for making those predictions on the Khoisan peoples, the mutation
Yes.
rates. He said,
Yes,
wow, I'm impressed, he said.
Yes, theistic or Christian evolutionists like Dr. Dennis Venema are more what do you call that, unbiased.
Yes.
He's still biased, but everybody has bias. So, but he is less biased than those atheist evolutionists. He's willing to give Dr. Jensen credit and is willing to work with him.
Yeah, and he said he's interested to see if the prediction comes true. He's looking forward to the testing of it, and
Yes.
he himself said that he's not willing to make the prediction because there's not enough data, right? 99% of evolutionists are too biased to admit that.
Only atheist evolutionists are biased.
Yeah.
Theistic evolutionists are more or less, that's why I'm okay with them, are more or less open-minded, but not all, of course.
And you know what? Speaking of that debate, I would probably recommend that debate as the most up-to-date creation evolution debate right now. Like that would be the debate because to be honest with you, it was so one-sided, especially the cross-examination. I mean, Dr. Jensen was just answering every question, every objection. He really showed the strength of the biblical model, and just praise from Dr. Venema for making that prediction was amazing as well.
And it was really a what you call that, and Dr. Mays did not what do you call that, he did not went as planned to what he and Dr. Jensen agreed upon on the format of the debate, which pisses me off.
Well, the thing is, Dr. May doesn't even understand that we explain the nuclear DNA differences as pre-existing DNA differences, pre-existing heterozygosity, and yet he goes in, he gets 6 months to prepare to read Replacing Darwin, and he can't even articulate the main thesis of the book. Oh, Dr. Jensen doesn't even deal with nuclear DNA rates, he says. And Dr. Jensen's like, what do I say in my book? And Paleogeia, actually, Matt just watched the video. So Matt, if you want to give your input, we're going to debunk Paleogeia's video soon on it. But because Paleogeia is science illiterate, that's why he won't debate us on it. But he made a mockery of Dr. Jensen saying, show me it in my book. But if Dr. Mays apparently read the book and was prepared for the debate, he should have been more than familiar with pre-existing heterozygosity and pre-existing DNA differences. So
yes,
I doubt he read it.
Exactly. Sidestepping. That's what he did. I don't know if sidestepping is the correct word, because he made a big deal about the substitution rates, in which I just explained a while ago. Why didn't he? Because it's like this. Okay, Dr. Jensen did not use substitution rates, more or less. He didn't use it. Okay, so and he used the typical evolutionary constant rate of mutation rates. Okay, but when creationists do it, when we challenge their assumptions of uniformitarianism, our data gets ignored. So Dr. Jensen ignored substitution rates because of the reasons I already revealed a while ago, and evolutionists ignore our our challenges to uniformitarianism-based assumptions on all evolutionary subjects, literature. They ignore. Do you see any creationist assumptions in those papers? In those let's say how the Grand Canyon erodes, how fast? No. Damn. So biased. Thank God I'm no longer an atheist evolutionist. That's all. Sorry about my temper.
No, it's frustrating when you see the misrepresentations, when you see the bias, and when you see somebody like Paleogeia making such an ill-informed video. I'd be surprised if Paleogeia even knew what pre-existing heterozygosity meant. Did you watch that video, Matt?
I thought our next one was going to be the Tony Reed video on that one.
On genetic entropy, right?
Right. Yeah, I didn't know it was Apologia one.
No. Well, I mean, Paleogenomics did the video on replacing Darwin, where he made fun of Dr. Jensen for saying, "Show me it in my book." Are you guys able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
Because I went over this in my debate with Jackson Wheat. He didn't have much to say about it, but are you there, Superbad? Can you see it?
Yes.
Now, the three major mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, you can see the length of the lines connecting here, right? How short they are.
My friend, can you please, if you can, if you can show this map and also show the evolutionary out of Africa map. I don't want evolutionists to accuse us of misrepresenting their data. So I would cross-reference both data. If you can put them together in the presentation, can you do that?
My goal is to get a separate slide with that one. I mean, right now I haven't added to it yet, but I wanted to at least go to because since we were on testable predictions, right here, right? The stamp of history and the transatlantic slave trade that he's working on.
One more thing, sorry, standing. I'm sorry again for interrupting you.
No, that's okay.
Because I've heard evolutionists on the transatlantic slave trade. They say, oh, we found this transatlantic slave trade. So why are creationists still looking for it? So dumb.
Yep. I actually, Dr. May said that.
Yeah, you know why? You know why we're looking for the transatlantic slave trade? You know why creationists are looking for the transatlantic slave trade? Because we are using a completely different method from theirs. We are using direct measurements here.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
this is a different map. We are finding the transatlantic slave trade in a map we generated. Not they found theirs on their map. Okay, we give them that. We are trying to look for it on our map to see if our map is correct or not. That's a problem when they don't read creationist literature.
Well, it's like when you exposed CRISPR and drag, because I liked your lawyer interrogation when you were debating them, and clearly exposed them for not understanding almost the basics of creationist papers.
Yes,
and yet they want to criticize what they don't even know.
Our material. They can debunk. They claim, oh, young Earth creationism is debunked, finally. Did you read creationist literature? No. Yeah.
Oh, I got to make a clip of it.
Yeah. We just debated young Earth creationism. Did you read creationist literature? No.
Do you remember that now? Yeah, that was
well,
good.
Aren't they always saying that? And when you cite a scientist who's a creationist, they do the same thing with them that they do with their own kind, so long as the data they produce doesn't make a case for evolution. Oh, he's a bad guy. He's no good. Then they throw him under the bus. So he's a terrible scientist. Does a lousy job. I've heard that about Jonathan Sanford. Jonathan Sanford happens to be one of the world's eminent geneticists. He's got a number of patents, inventor of the gene gun, Stanford University. Look, if you want to badmouth a guy because he's a creationist, that's one thing. But to say he's a lousy scientist, are you giving me a break? Yeah. Do you know how hard it is to get a job as a geneticist at Stanford University? Please, with this, he's a lousy geneticist stuff. You've got to be kidding. Take that narrative somewhere else, please.
Especially somebody like Paleogenomics that me and Raw Matt just destroyed his video a week ago. He's on there attacking, just like you said, attacking him as a scientist as if he could, hold a candle to someone like, Dr. John Sanford or a lot of these evolutionists. They'll use such ridiculous arguments, say genetic related arguments, as if someone like Dr. Sanford, someone as trained as Dr. Sanford or Dr. Jensen, haven't thought of these things. You know what I mean? Like they're just so underread, undereducated on the work themselves. They go to, like, for example, Jackson Wheat, I'm pretty sure, got the majority of his rebuttals from probably Tony Reed's video and Paleogenomics' video. which is why he wasn't able to directly address a lot of the details of genetic entropy, because if there's no rebuttal out there from these evolutionists, they're not going to know how to respond to it.
Well, they have to stick to their scripts. You know, the script is similarity means evolution is true, and so anything that argues against that is immediately discarded.
Well, exactly right. Super bad. If you're are you looking at the screen?
Yes.
Because if you remember in the debate how they were talking about L, actually, if I don't know if CRISPR's still in the chat right now, but
I wish there's the other map also. It's okay. It's okay.
well, are you able to just point it out from here as to why they're misunderstanding what we're saying about the length of the lines, the LMN versus the subgroups?
Do you have the slide with the LMN, the letters written in the slide?
Well, I think I
If
just
you don't,
have. No, those are the only ones.
it will be hard to. Well, anyway, so what was that again? My friend.
I want to try and find their rebuttal to. Well, let's see if CRISPR is still in the chat. Is my screen still sharing?
Yes.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think
No.
Now it's not.
Yeah, no.
Okay, there you go. Super bad. Yeah, you know how CRISPR says that the middle arrow isn't L, it's L3,
Yes.
and he's trying to say that LMN, the three major haplogroups, aren't
Where's the map?
indicative of Noah's three sons' wives or his three daughters-in-law.
Where's the map? All right, never mind. All right. So this is Chris.
Just a quick little rebuttal, I think, is all.
So he's asking what again? What? So what is he asking? Sorry.
The middle arrow isn't L, it's L3. Or
Yes. The L. The LM and the LM and N that we are referring to are close to Northeast Africa, actually. Okay, and at the same time, not only are they close to Northeast Africa, that is why we call it out of Africa. Sorry, that is why they call it out of Africa, right? Because the LMN is so close to Northeast Africa, because beside Northeast Africa is already the Red Sea and Saudi Arabia, already the Middle East. Okay, so okay, let me refresh my memory because I don't. Okay, and here's also research from them, from evolutionists. This is not creationist thing. Dr. Jensen just used evolutionary data here, actually. So there is no misrepresentation here. The LMN that are close to Northeast Africa, almost leaving Africa, out of Africa, those three show small genetic differences. They're just a few. That is why they are close. Even in the evolutionary map, you can see it. They're closer together. That is why I need the other map, so that evolutionists will not accuse me of bias. They're also close together in their map. Go tell them to look, if they know how to look. If they know how to look.
I don't know if they do.
Those LMNs are close to Northeast Africa. They're there. Okay? That is why creationists infer those three LMNs are connected to each other. Wait, I'm a little lost here.
Hey, sorry to cut you. I'm sorry to cut you off, super bad. Can you see the screen?
Hang on. Yeah.
Okay, so for example, this is under the debate with me and Jackson Wheat. So
you don't need to do this with these clowns, you know.
well, I just want to.
Why spend time talking to them when they don't really care about evidence?
Well, I
Or
just
they'll
want to
be
show. I
biased.
just want to demonstrate to the audience how little they know, because I accused Jackson. I should have more so said not understanding, misunderstanding, but I said straw man, because he pointed out haplogroups M and N are subsets of L. But at the end of the day, what I said here. Well, here's CRISPR's comment.
I thought I already explained this in the other video.
Yeah, you did. You did, and that's the whole point. You did in detail. The thing is, Jackson didn't give much of a rebuttal to it, anyways. But that's how desperate they are at refusing to accept. And you know, it doesn't even matter if they refuse to accept it, because you know what? The predictions have been made on the Khoisan peoples. The predictions have been made in regards to the stamp of civilization.
Yeah, if you want to beat their assumption, you will have to address all their arguments, correct? Not just we don't say that since we already have predictions, so let's just ignore the other data, right?
Exactly.
So okay, so okay, how do I start this? It's so difficult without the map, and I don't know how to. I need to point the map. It's so hard to explain it without the map, without both maps present. Without both maps present, so hard to explain. Well, anyway, it's like this. Like I said several minutes ago, the LMN that is near Northeast Africa are the out of Africa, because they are besides Northeast Africa is already the Middle East. It's already the Middle East, so it's already leaving Africa. That is the LMN in the creationist, in the Dr. Jensen lines on paper. Very yeah, that okay. And these three show LMN. These three show very few genetic differences between the three of them. Okay. It means that if their genetic differences are few, they it's so hard to explain. Anyway, their genetic differences are few. So let's just, so here it is, LMN. All right, and this is out of Africa. Here is the Middle East. Now, the other L's CRISPR's referring to is West and South of Africa, correct? Now,
Correct.
Here's the thing. Genetic differences of the three primary LMNs, it's in their literature. If they don't know, shame. It's the three LMN, the primary LMN, their genetic differences are few from each other. But the L of the LMN compared to the other L's, their genetic differences are larger. Do you get it, Chris? Sorry, Christopher's not here, right? So
Yeah, that just shows the evidence that the three distinct ones are.
Because the genetic differences from this LMN are different from the other L's. There's a gap of genetic differences. My goodness. Are you trying to fool me?
That just verifies that three mitochondrial DNAs are in fact distinct, and they are evidence that the world spawned from Shem, Yafet, and Ham. That's what it shows. So we could infer that since these three primary L's show few genetic differences, and the rest, the other L's from the L show larger genetic differences. That's why the African map has a huge line on Dr. Jensen's paper. He didn't misrepresent data. It is exactly like the evolutionary map. He just used the line analogy using direct measurements. It revealed the same data.
And what do we say about the recombination rates or the mutation rates in Because the prediction has been made on the Khoisan.
Standing for truth, I'm sorry, but I think you are jumping to something else. But it's okay. Sorry for that.
No, that's okay.
Because
It's because that's why I brought it.
There are many angles here. There are several angles here, so it's so difficult to explain without the map. There are so many angles here, because all right. So those few genetic differences separating L and N, which are, like I said, close to Northeast Africa, those they can only be a creationist evidence. They already look like a creationist evidence right now, but hang on, somebody's messaging me.
Can I
Right, never mind. Okay, hang on. All right.
I have to go.
Where was I again?
Well, you gotta get going now.
Yeah, I
No,
gotta go.
no.
I just want to say one more quick thing before I go.
Go ahead.
This evidence is powerful evidence that the world was rebooted by Shem, Japhet, and Ham after the end of the Noahic flood, and their 3 wives. See, Shem, Japhet, and Ham, and their 3 wives is why we have these 3 distinct mitochondrial DNAs. That's it. That's the evidence. It matches the biblical account. I gotta go. Hey, thanks for having me in your hangout. You guys
No problem, Neff. Anytime. We'll do it again soon.
Yep.
Yeah,
See you guys later. Thanks. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Those LMNs already look like a creationist, because the creation model would predict that the 3 daughters-in-law of Noah will have a few genetic differences from each other, because the pre-flood world, you did not need, it was only 1600 years. The pre-flood world was only 1600 years, so not much genetic differences would arise in that short amount of time. And that's exactly what we see on the LMN. And the primary LMN, there are other L's, right? Like I said, in the vicinity of the LMN. But those genetic differences, compared to the L3, the primary LMN over there, is larger. So creationists can infer that because the pre-flood world was only 1600 years, that less genetic differences would arise. Correct? Now, I don't want to repeat what I've already explained in the past video, so
Yeah,
I'll just add a new evidence. I'll just add a new evidence which suddenly came to mind
Yeah.
to support this LMN. Okay, another evidence, and this is not the only one. I've got several more surprises.
Well, I like how you
LMN,
bring them out slowly.
this LMN over here, where is it? Where did I say it is? It is Northeast Africa, correct?
Correct.
Right. So they're in Northeast Africa. So, and like I said, it is so close to the Middle East, correct? We just have to cross the Red Sea, and there you go. You're already in the Middle East. And what is in the Middle East? The Tower of Babel. And evolutionists cannot put the center of genetic diversity there. That's why they put it in Africa, in Northeast Africa. It is too close for comfort for them to put it in the Middle East. Actually, you can put it anywhere. You could even put the center of genetic diversity on the Red Sea. You can even put it there, or you can even put it because the center of genetic diversity worldwide is in Northeast Africa. And this is not like I said in the past video. This is not very sure, although it is likely correct. But it depends on your starting point. If you assume evolution, then you put it northeast of Africa, and if you assume creation, then you could put the center of genetic diversity in Saudi Arabia, or even in Israel, or somewhere there in Kazakhstan. Sorry, Kazakhstan is too far already. But the main point is this: the center of genetic diversity, wherever it is, it means we came from that. There, we cannot have come from somewhere not at the center of genetic diversity. We can only come from a place where genetic diversity is the most. Okay, and when evolutionists put it in Northeast Africa, they just put it there, just like that, because of their evolutionary assumptions. And in fact, you can also put it in the Middle East.
Now,
So the
what do you
evidence.
and what do you say when somebody, like, let's say CRISPR, if he says, 'cause he's in the chat right now, let's say if he says according to the map, it would require that one of the three to be the actual ancestor to the other two. So he's trying to say the L, M, and N aren't connected the way that we say they are.
What? Sorry, I don't understand. So the L descended from M and N.
Exactly. Yeah.
How can that happen when their genetic differences are already very few upon each other?
Yeah, that's what I've already said. I think it was in the question and answer.
Don't you see the map? Sorry, there are two maps. So hard to explain without the map.
I tried looking for it on Google. I can't, but yeah, reiterate your question.
Wait. The L, the M and N coming from the L is never mind. I forgot what to say. Whatever, your turn. Standing for truth.
Well, the fact that the lines are, yeah, I don't see how that argument is.
Did this guy, what his name again?
No. I think he's saying at M and N descended from L.
Yes. It also shows. Can you put our map there, Dr. Jeanson's map? Standing for truth.
Yeah.
Please.
They think that.
I don't disagree on how it looks like. It does look like L descended from M and N. I will not dispute that. It only looks like that. Let me explain why it's not true. Please, the map.
Or M and N descended from L. Here, yeah.
If evolution is true, then what CRISPR is saying could be true. But if evolution is false, the map, please.
Okay, I'll put the map. You're saying it's a worldview thing.
Yeah.
Okay, here, let me.
I already explained this before. Did he not get it?
Yeah. Well, no. Actually, I answered. I said that exact same thing in the question and answer.
I'll give him another explanation. I'll give him another explanation with the map.
Okay, I'll put the map up.
I already said the genetic differences of the L, M, N that is in Northeast Africa are few compared to the other L's. That is already saying something. That was not the initial prediction of the haplogroups, which evolutionists wrote before the 80s.
We'll give them one. We'll end it here with this. I'll pull up the map. We'll give them one final explanation. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Yeah, I see it. Well, not.
That's why I need the.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
That's the only one I got for now.
Okay, so what's his name again? Whoever he is. Do you see the branch that is the longest one? The right side, right?
Right here.
The other L's are over there, very far over there.
Yeah.
The evolutionary map also shows the same thing.
Yeah.
But they made it a little closer because they have to fit everything in Africa.
Exactly.
See, there it is. The other L's are farther from the primary LMN. Please put the mouse on the LMN right now. These are the L0s, L whatever. CRISPR was, sorry with my English. All right, there, yeah. So you see, these are the L's. Sorry, yeah. Those were the other L's, the long African branch over there, spanning the entire half of the picture. And the L, M, and N is here on the other side of the map. The L is the middle arrow. The M, N is the arrow in which, the L is in the middle, correct? Everybody following? The L is the middle arrow. And the M and N are the other two arrows connecting it. So here's the thing. Here's the worldview thing. Since the L is connecting LMN, as you can see, Dr. Jensen actually represented the evolutionary position well over here. I commend him for that because when I compared it to the evolutionary haplogroup map, wow, I say it's very similar. Only a few adjustments, only a few bias actually. from evolutionists. All right. So here, L is in the middle, the middle arrow, M and N is spraying from the L. Do you guys see it? The L is in the middle, remember. And the other two arrows are the M and N. So by CRISPR's worldview, I do not disagree. It looks like L was the descendant of M and N because the L is at the center of M and there are two lines that sprayed off from the L. Okay? Now the create, so I do not really, I already said this in the other video. My goodness. I have to explain it again. Does he really know genetics? My goodness. Here. So CRISPR, if you're listening, I do not dispute what you're saying. It looks like L this produced M and N based on this little line here. Okay? But the problem is, why are the three so distinct? Why are there genetic differences so different from the other L's?
Exactly. Yeah.
On the African, God damn it. Sorry with my English. The half of the map. Sorry, the wrong English again. I think CRISPR already get it. All right, and look at the LMN. Right. All right. So CRISPR L. Yes, it looks like M and N descended from L because L is in the middle of M and N. And when you know how to, I have done. There was a time in one of the universities here. I checked mtDNA differences myself. Well, not so deep. But a professor asked me to help, so I did help. So there's the L in the middle. So yeah, and there are two, and the M and N is connecting to the L. So it looks like L produced N and M. Okay, that is your worldview, CRISPR. I will represent you correctly, so you are right. But it depends. Because like I said several minutes ago, that those three show little genetic differences from one another. And their genetic differences combined is completely different from the African side also. So completely different. You get it?
And that's what's indicated. It's the short lines that are
it's the short branch proportion.
Yeah,
because the creationist model predicted that it was only 1600 years before the flood, so not much time for massive mutations to occur. So we would expect our origins,
long lives.
They will have lesser genetic differences, and this is what we see. The evolutionary map also showed the same thing. They just edited a little bit. They just adjusted it a bit. There are several evolutionary maps on this. Some of them are accurate, some of them are biased. That's why I need the other map. But anyway, that's the point. Our worldview, CRISPR, our worldview suggests that because these branch proportions are so short, that is our prediction. 1600 years, less mutations. Less means less genetic differences would arise. Okay, get it? Now, your worldview is because, this is your worldview. L is in the middle, N and M are connected to it. So when I look at this from an evolutionary starting point, yes, it looks like M and N really came from L. So I cannot disprove what you say. I'm not afraid to say that, but can you disprove mine?
I think that's.
You will say yes. You will say yes. Of course.
That's just a bias, yeah.
Yes.
But the point is, it's these independent lines of evidence that fit exactly what we see in genetics, in mitochondrial DNA. It's consistent with a biblical creation model. The history of humanity really is in our genome, and we have no reason as biblical creationists to feel like the evidence isn't there. There's lots of reasons for the evidence. But I wanted to, I think this was really good, really informative. I think we addressed a lot of good points. I wanted to give Matt a couple final words, Landon a couple final words, and I think we will end it for the night, guys.
All right, go ahead, Landon. You go first, man. You haven't spoke much.
Okay, I mean, I thought we covered all of the topics for the last debate pretty in depth. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we can hear you good.
Okay. I think that we all made some valid points, and it'd be interesting to have maybe you and Jackson Wheat and like a follow-up video, like more of a discussion, not a debate, just to try to go through like what we covered here, maybe. But
well, you
yeah, I enjoyed it.
If you wanted to, we've had 2 back and forth discussions, each about an hour and a half. And we've had me and the Film Free. We had about an hour discussion with Jackson and RJ. That's why this debate we decided to do formal, because it wouldn't make any sense to do a 4th discussion. So I thought formal would be the way to go. But yeah, you could certainly watch our discussions as well if you'd like. I think the most informative and best demonstration of both sides and both models was the formal debate, though, because we had a chance to have presentations, but altogether I think there's been about five debates. So I mean, I would do another formal one or another discussion. I think that'd be fun. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say to that.
All right. Well, I enjoyed speaking with everybody. So.
Awesome, Landon. Well, thanks for coming on, brother. We'll definitely do it again soon. We'll definitely, maybe the next one we'll get some atheists in here, have some back and forth discussion, and we'll end it with you, Matt.
All right. Well, in my work, I actually, going back to the bat, they've actually found the original bat, and it's called the giant burrowing bat. And the thing was a beast. It could burrow in the ground. It could run. It could eat anything. It could eat the fruit. It could eat other animals. It was much more powerful than any of the other recent bats that they've ever discovered. Super bad. CRISPR-Cas9 is not just a person's name on this thing. He actually, that's a gene sequencing thing. If you don't know about it, research it. It's phenomenal. It's incredible. The 3 haplogroups that they're using are just correlations that we're trying to find evidence for that's actually represented in the Bible. We actually have a lot of things outside of that, and some of those things are like 99.9% genetic relations to all human beings. We have the Fertile Crescent, which is exactly where the Bible says humans originated from. We have genetic deterioration. Of course, that can be refuted because we don't have a long-term enough scale going back to show this, but we have enough evidence to show that disease is increasing. What are the odds that we're all frugivores, just like the Bible describes putting man inside of a garden? And this guy talking about G-Man, I saw that guy once. That's like watching a monkey fuck a football. That guy's all over the place, man. I don't know what I think about him. It's awful to listen to, frankly. Besides the odds that we're all frugivores, what are the odds that we all came from a single female? And if you go by the evolutionary perspective on when this happened, about 100 to 200,000 years ago, you're getting a genetic diversity of about what they say is about 10,000 women. Now, 10,000 women, now you're looking at the odds of just one of them having an offspring that created all human beings today. What are the odds of that? I mean, they have to say that the rescuing devices are all the other women must have had boys, or that the women must have died out, or their genetic lines died out. But going back to the Bible, that's pretty amazing. The odds are very odd and very unique that just 10,000 women alive 200,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago can produce one line that we all have today, kind of lining up with the Bible. Science has proven that the chicken came before the egg, kind of lining up with what we found. What are the odds that the genetic lineages have traced the best genetics to the Middle East? Kind of what the scriptures talk about. Language formation, that's my specialty. We found that language cannot evolve on its own. They've actually proven that. So anyway, maybe next time I'm on, I'll describe some of those things in more detail, and we'll just go from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks as well, Matt. Hopefully this week sometime we can do one of our rebuttal videos. I think either Tony Reed's or another one of Pelagia's, but I think we got a lot of fun to look forward to this year. Let's make 2019 worth it, brother. And aren't you coming out with a video soon that you've been working on?
Yes.
Okay.
I have. It will be done. I don't know. The upload will probably take a while, but yeah, it should be done in the next couple days.
Sweet. Looking forward to it. Oh, and we got to do R and Ra's phylogeny challenge. So lots of things to look forward to this year. Genetic marker specifics. We're getting super bad in here. So lots for everybody, lots for the audience to look forward to. Okay, guys. So glad everybody had fun, and Standing for Truth is out.